Okay, so I just want to preface this video by saying that this is my longest video yet. Just I'm just sitting and editing it right now. It's fucking long, man. Um, I hope you watch the whole thing. If you don't, then it's understandable because it's just me rambling on for an hour straight. But yeah, I will be linking the original document below, if the author wants me to, that is. Please let me know your takes on everything that I say in this video, in the comments. And yeah, I hope you enjoy. You can also hit me up on my Instagram if you have any questions, if you want to ask anything. On my last video I got one comment with this one guy saying that he found my content really interesting. Now this is someone that I don't know, so it's pretty nice for me. Just, just someone saying that, I'd love to ask you a few questions, and I gave him my Instagram, and I really like that. So, so yeah, if you want to ask me questions, then hit me up. And thank you for watching and liking and subscribing. Okay, guys. So I promised this friend of mine, Chalk, that I would respond to this. I mean, not really respond, it's just give my kind of take on this article that he wrote. And I feel like writing is a bit of a lost art. Not enough people are indulging in writing, including myself. I don't engage in enough writing, as much writing as I probably should be engaging in. And yeah, I just wanted to talk about what he had written down, and his kind of take on it, and I'll give you my take on it. And just overall, I hope that you can also have your own take on this. And if you do, please let me know in the comments, or like personally, if you can text me or whatever, that'd be great. Right, so let's just get started. Self-improvement is easy, and yet you can't do it, by Chalk. Looking to make a change and finally embark upon the journey of self-improvement, there's a wonderful step-by-step process to get you going. Now, initially, when I went through this, I was a bit perplexed, because I've always seen it as a 3-step process, which we'll actually get to. It's about your it's always been, if I can draw this, it's about your who, your how, and your what. So it always starts internally first. I mean, that's the best way to do it. That's an ideal. Who you want to be. Who are you? Who will you be? Say you want to be an athlete. You have to change your identity in order to fully embrace that process of self-improvement. But you can't just change your identity, obviously, because even if you sit down and write 100 times, I am an athlete, I am an artist, I am a musician, whatever I am, you aren't really that, because you yourself won't believe in it. You know that writing it down on paper that I am an athlete, it won't make you an athlete, right? So in order to prove to yourself that you are, you really just have to make promises to yourself and not break them. Make promises to yourself that you will do the things an athlete does, and after a certain amount of time, you'll have proof to yourself that, okay, I'm doing what an athlete does, I'm acting like an athlete, so I must be an athlete, right? Because what else differentiates an athlete from the normal human being? An athlete does what an athlete's supposed to do. And if you're doing what an athlete's supposed to do, you are pretty much an athlete. That's how you really convince yourself. But anyway, and we get to the how. How am I going to become an athlete? What are the goals that I need to set? So your identity and your goals. You set the goals, and then the what is what I'm going to do to achieve those goals. Action. So to me, it's always been a 3-step process of identity, goals, and action. goals or plan. I feel like plan is slightly better because plan is more all-inclusive. Goals is just like a target, whereas a plan is kind of like how you're gonna get to that target. You know, the steps you have to take. But anyway, we've got idea, thoughts, feelings, plans, habits, commitment, lifestyle change. Okay, so this isn't really a step-by-step process. I'm not sure if Jock himself wrote this down or if he found it from a different source. If someone told him about this, but this is more like the natural way, an ideal natural way, natural process of how this would happen. It's not really a framework. It's not really the step-by-step process that you might tell someone. I feel like this is more appropriate in terms of that. But even this has its own limitations. Like I mentioned, it doesn't tell you the things you have to do to actually change your identity in the first place. So over here we have idea, the idea, and this is represented in circles as well, which I don't really like. I feel like this would be more visually representative of what they're trying to go for by if it was a flow chart, right, going from top to bottom, rather than something that has a core and then outer layers. Whereas I feel like this, ultimately your core identity is going to make you do everything else you do, right? But anyway, I don't want to get into the really trivial things too much. Idea, thoughts, feelings, plan, habits, commitment, lifestyle change. I'm sure you can fill those out on your own. Your idea could be that I want to be an athlete. Thoughts, I think thoughts is too vague. I think up until about the fourth, all of that is kind of part of your the fourth tier. That's all part of your thoughts. Your feelings towards it, maybe you might feel resentment that I'm not an athlete yet. And right now I'm just trying to break this down, what I think he means. What you might feel resentment, you might feel aspiration, you might feel a lot of different things. Fourth is plan, is to plan out how you're going to get there, I assume. Fifth is habits, the things that you're gonna do every day, every week, every month to actually make it happen. Sixth is commitment, committing to those habits. I actually think that commitment probably comes before habits, because your commitment kind of sets the foundation for your habits, because the habit isn't really a habit, it's just a one-off action if you don't have the commitment in the first place. Seventh is the lifestyle, and eighth is change. So I think the order for this personally would be commitment, lifestyle, and then habits. Or maybe I think you could swap around habits and lifestyle, but yeah. Wonderful, isn't it? No, it really isn't. Lately, the rampant popularity of self-improvement videos and seemingly helpful influencers has really been bothering me. The idea of an improved life just seems so perfect to me. 8 steps to change your life, where you take your feelings and thoughts into account separately and then plan it out, seems too much of mundane work. These plans put little emphasis on those crazy hours where you're creating something of your own. Because only when you start creating something you realize how it consumes you. Time dilates as you try to delve deeper in something that you're passionate about. As I write this, I was told to get some fresh sunlight on this beautiful morning. Sure, but I really want to write this. To some level, I do agree. I feel like this was the state of the self-improvement kind of online industry up until a couple years ago, up until we've had some really positive influencers come up. So someone that immediately comes to my head when I read the first paragraph is someone like Mac Diavella. He has a huge following, a lot of subscribers. You know, he's doing well in his own life, but I really dislike his mentality of when it comes of just how he handles self-improvement. It's like they're all 30-day challenges. That's not really how you build up habits. You don't do a 30-day challenge. You don't. So I don't really think that you can build habits by doing 30-day challenges. It's not really it doesn't make sense to me. because what it really takes is a lifelong commitment. If you think about it, the most sustainable habits are the ones that you can do for the rest of your life. Waking up at 5:30 in the morning, it makes you feel good for a bit. It also makes you feel like shit when you can't go out, or you've stayed out for like half an hour too long. You've come home at 9:30 instead of 9 because you have to go to sleep so damn early to get up at 5:30 in the morning. It's not really sustainable. Sure, it works really well for the couple of months that you want to do your monk mode or whatever they call it. It works really well for the time that you want to be fully productive, but it's not sustainable because that's not how you're going to be able to live the rest of your life. In The Way of the Superior Man, David Dida, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, he talks about how you should live every day as you would live the rest of your life. And this makes a lot of sense to me because every single day you want that day to be complete. You want to be productive during that day. You want to be physically active. You want to be loving. You want to be around family. You want to be working on your body. You want to be playing sports. You want to be with your friends. You want to try and have as whole of a day as possible and just repeat that every single day. Now, maybe an issue with that is that every day kind of bleeds into the other. You don't really have things you can look back to. Your life might feel like everything's just gone by too fast, which is something that I do feel like I've faced recently. But I think that might just be because of the amount of time I've just spent just sitting on my desk. I don't really do too much, especially with my broken foot, broken ankle. Regardless, these plans put little emphasis on those crazy hours when you're creating something of your own. That's very true. At least up until recently, where you didn't have many people really talk about the difficult aspect of self-improvement, right? You have people like Andrew Tate saying, I don't know if he actually said this, but like this is what people like to think he says: depression isn't real, just don't be depressed. I think there's a lot of people who probably just need to find things to do to be less depressed. But obviously, things like clinical depression definitely exist. And 100% you can get out of it, but just maybe it's not as simple as saying just don't be depressed, right? And I feel like it's a very lazy argument in the first place, and it's not worth arguing with, so I'm gonna move on. Because only when you start creating something you realize how it consumes you. Time dilates as you try to delve deeper in something that you're passionate about. That's very true, actually. It's what I've been experiencing recently. As I write this, I was told to get some fresh sunlight on this beautiful morning. Sure, but I really want to write this. Absolutely. I feel like flow state is something that's kind of discouraged the self-improvement industry, where you have these people talk about fucking Pomodoro technique, which is like work for 25 minutes, take a break, and work again. No, in an ideal situation, you wouldn't have to do that. You would just really find something that you really get into the flow state of while doing, and you just keep doing that until you're exhausted for like 90 minutes or so. Then you take a small break and then you get back to it. Ideally, that's how it would work. Apparently, scientific studies, empirical evidence shows that you can only work for 4 hours on a specific task throughout the day. So imagine like just spending 4 hours just sitting and like working your ass off, being in the complete flow state. Because trust me, most of us aren't really in a flow state when we're getting stuff done. We're kind of super distracted all over the place. We're thinking of 30 different things. This happens to me every day. I face this issue every single day where I'm just constantly distracted and I'm unproductive, and it makes me feel like shit, honestly. I think it's important, Had I been on that self-improvement schedule, I would have lost these thoughts. Get the gist? Um, I feel like a mistake the author of this chalk he's made like throughout this is kind of assuming, and this is a mistake we all make. So I don't have too much against it, but I do feel like he could do better. Whereas like it's just clumping a lot of self improvement influencers together, because that's just not what it is. In my experience, listening to someone like Hamza or Captain Sinbad, two of my favorite self improvement YouTubers, partially because they're brown and I'm brown and I love brown people. But no, these guys, they're not. I don't think. I don't think it's fair to be to clump everyone into one bracket, especially because a lot of them don't preach anything like, you know, like how easy that it might be to improve on yourself. Or maybe I'm just a fucking pussy who can't get his shit together. Go. Maybe. I recently rewatched Fight Club, and one particular dialogue stood out to me. Self improvement is masturbation, now self destruction. Let me be very clear. I don't support fight clubs or the use of acid to harm yourself or any form of radical action that physically or mentally tortures someone else or yourself. However, I only wish to argue how self improvement is in fact a means of pleasuring your own psyche, but instead a gradual breakdown of yourself to destroy old bad habits, and building yourself back up is the way to go. Now, this is where I feel like me and the author might not be on the same page, because I feel like I haven't thought about this enough. The term self improvement on its own, because it is a very vague term, and I feel like we don't really sit and break it down as much as we should be. I'm someone who really preaches just sitting and thinking about things, and I feel like just the term self improvement, I haven't really sat down and thought about enough. Self improvement is masturbation. Now, I think this, in some sense, I hope the author can correct me if I'm wrong on here, but this in some sense relates to what I said in my last video about you can't be average, wherein we discuss the idea that a lot of people who get into self improvement are just within the average crowd and going from just slightly below the line to just slightly above the line, and for them that is self improvement. And that's, personally, I think that's definitely aspirational in its own way. I think it takes a lot of fucking effort, because there's just so many people in that sort of average space to actually overcome and be the best of the rest. I feel like that takes a lot. I feel like that's aspirational in its own way. But for me personally, I think of myself, I think of my potential as someone who's way higher, and I feel, and the way, just personally knowing the author, I feel like he himself is also someone who doesn't see himself in that sort of below average, above average bracket. As I see it, self improvement and self destruction are very similar in action, but vary in the perspective they're viewed from. Okay, yeah, this the first time I read this line didn't make complete sense to me, but now that I'm just sitting and kind of thinking about it, this makes a lot of fucking sense. Self improvement and self destruction are very similar in action, but vary in the perspective they are viewed from. So fucking true, man. And I think this really, really, really well ties into who, how, and what principles. Because in Fight Club, what Tyler Durden does, he doesn't go from someone who's an insomniac to someone who is who gets decent sleep, someone who's getting promotions at work, someone whose boss stops yelling at him and he has status within his company. No, he goes from the fucking modern day slave, corporate slave, to the ruler of one of the greatest, to the leader of the greatest movement in all of modern humankind. And I think that makes a lot of fucking sense. And I feel like for the small minority of people who really want to go and be able to do that shit, you need self-destruction. I destroyed a version of myself a few months ago when it wasn't like this. It wasn't as simple as spreading some acid on the top of my hand. It was a gradual process. It took a few months, but I feel like that version of myself is gone now. I'm a different person now. I'm far more arrogant. I'm way more aggressive. I stopped doing shit. I mean, not entirely. Like, I know I get distracted a lot, way more than a lot of people that I look up to. I still get distracted a lot, but my ambition and my self belief is in a completely different place right now. I really believe that. Argument 1. Preliminary approach. Self improvement looks to build people, create new habits gradually, and approach it from a positive perspective. Certainly, now the spreading awareness of Stoicism and formal literature has creeped into these ideas of self improvement, thus legitimizing it to a certain extent. And personally, some influencers like Ryan Holiday, Noel Dazel have helped me in my journey as well. But notice, they are trying to suggest small ideas that aren't rigid. And most importantly, their perspective is not condescending or patronizing in any way. When they speak, they come down to our level to help us lift us to their level eventually. That's what sets them apart from the rest. Now, what I feel like is in the self improvement space, the whole idea of having small ideas and having them influence us over time. Just little influences. Now, like I said, the idea of having self improvement and having a situation where you have people preaching these really small ideas and actions that you can take and you can use to change yourself. I feel like that's what works for most people. It certainly worked for me when I was getting past my stage of real, like, true depression and just working my way back up. I feel like that's what someone really needs, especially most guys nowadays. At least the ones that I surround myself with, who are in a situation where they are just incredibly. They are depressed. They are anxious. They are going through a lot of shit. They're addicted to substances. They're addicted to video games, whatever it is, whatever their vices are. I think you really do need to make small changes to uplift yourself, to get yourself back to that baseline, and then you can see where you want to work up from there. Then you can see how much how much uh, how far you can really go. That's where it was for me. I feel like if you're healing from trauma, which a lot of people are, it's what I was doing. You really need to go easy on yourself. You really need to take really small actions to bring yourself up to baseline, and then you look at what you can do from that point on. Because if you've really been in the trenches and you're able to get yourself back up to baseline, most people who are able to do that end up skyrocketing in life. It's just a pattern that I've seen. It's just a pattern that it just kind of exists within nature. I feel like if you really hit rock bottom, there's one of two things that happen to you. One is that you go even fucking deeper and you never come back, or you bounce up and you just go up and you go up and up and up and you don't stop. Feel like that's the way the two things are. The further deep you go, the more potential you have, but the more likely you are that you're probably gonna end up failing. Now the other influencers. Now something that I don't like about this essay or article or thought piece is that there's not many influencers being named, which it's not just that it doesn't hold people accountable. I feel like it's just very difficult for me to refer to what is the definition of other influencers, and it's just very difficult for me to understand what you mean by this, what the author means by this, because I might see what they say from a certain perspective that the author hasn't seen, and I might see a different intention in there, and I might see a different effect that it has on people. So it's just something that's it bothers me a little bit, but it's okay. We move on. Now the other influencers assume a position of authority or portray themselves as better than you. I have no problem if you're better than me and tell that to my face. Good. But that's not how you help others. That's just messed up. They portray their lives as picture perfect while adding a little sob story about their past to somehow give them credibility. Just because you were once fat and now became muscular doesn't mean you're better than me. Why did you get fat in the first place? When you were midway through your cut, you weren't better than me, you just joined me at my playing field. I can't fathom anyone else telling me how to live my life after they assume a place of arrogance. Now there's two things in this. First one is that if someone's been really fat and they've gotten to your level, whereas you've just stayed at your level this whole time, I don't think there's a objective way of telling like if someone's better than you or not. Does that person have a better drive than you within that specific field, and within that field of fitness or aesthetics? Yes. Has that person done more work within that individual field than you? Then yes. Has that person probably gone through worse things than you by being fat and you having to be average? Yes. Now if you consider that to make them better than you in that specific field, because we're not talking about holistic self-development here, we're just talking about that one specific scenario of just fitness, maybe just like being fat, maybe being skinny, maybe being muscular, whatever it is. If we're talking about the one specific field, I would probably say that they're better than you, and they're more because you've just stayed in this one place this whole time, whereas this person has been almost mercurial. They've been going up and down. They're more likely to progress than you are. So that's just my perspective on it. I'm not saying that they're objectively better than you, because I think just saying that A is better than B is a very toxic way to live, because I just don't believe that. I feel like there's certain things that you can be better at, right? The second thing is that why did you get fat in the first place when you that's not how you help others. That's just messed up. Again, I don't know who the author specifically talking about in this, but it is, you do help a lot of people by saying that you used to be fat and you got skinny and then you got bulked up and you got really muscular. It helps a lot of fucking people, because it makes people realize that, you know what, if I'm like really fat, if there's someone else who can go and do this, then I probably can. You know, genetics aside, like the whole, just putting aside that whole black pill kind of mindset that, you know, genetics determine everything, which they don't. Everything is nature and nurture. If someone's had the nature of living in a household that's made them fat, of being in a situation that's made them fat, they've come up with their own way to get lean again. That's incredibly aspirational, and it's incredibly positive for a lot of people. When I show my friends my before and after pics, if the editing version of me would like to show them on screen my before and after pics, like just 18 months of progress, and between this I had exams, I had boards, I had a leg injury, I had a lot of shit in between. If you look at my before and after pics, for a lot of guys that's huge inspiration. For a lot of my friends, because they don't believe that it was the same person. just 18 months ago, right? It gives, because most people aren't really in that situation where 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 they're like 10 kilograms overweight like I was. Most people, like, if they're overweight, they're probably like a couple kilograms overweight, at least like within my surroundings, and they really hate it and they really want to change it, and then they see someone else who is able to do that. It gives them so much belief and so much hope, and it makes it really, that's one of the things that can like really set you up for success, because Hyungmin Son said this in an Instagram post that I saw recently, and it was really wholesome and I loved reading it. I don't know if it was him or it was a quote, but he basically said that he won he reached the 100 goals in the Premier League sort of club that there is. There's only a few players who've ever done that, and he's the first Asian player to do it. And he said, I'm really grateful that I'm the first Asian player to do this, but what I feel better about, and I'm paraphrasing here, is that there's gonna be kids back in South Korea, in Korea, who are gonna be able to look at that and say, he's done it before, so I can do it again. I can follow his footsteps. That's fucking beautiful, man. Just being able to see that happen, it's beautiful. It feels incredible. Especially if you're the one who's done it for the first time. And for me, I hope to be that type of a role model for a lot of people. You know, I used to have this really like super inferiority complex, like, no, that could never be me. But hopefully, in future generations, when there are people like me, they'll look at me from the past and they'll be like, he did that, so I can probably go and do it. And I might be able to do it better than him. And I'd fucking love to see that. This, and just one quick thing before I move on. After they assume a place of arrogance, I don't see arrogance as a bad thing personally. I feel like any masculine, powerful individual, you need arrogance. Just me saying that I don't want to be average, that's being arrogant, because what makes you think that you're better than everyone else in whatever way that you won't be average, right? That's coming from a place of arrogance, and this is just one of those things that I really dislike about people. This is something that I talked about. Arrogance isn't a bad thing. Arrogance is what pushes you, it's what maintains high standards for yourself, right? Even saying that, oh, you know what, arrogance without proving it isn't good. But I'm like, if that arrogance is really true and you really have that self-identity, then I really just think that as long as something horrible doesn't happen to you in life, you'll probably end up getting there. And that's something that I've kind of realized, that those Instagram posts you see everywhere, just believe in yourself and everything else will come. It's fucking true. They're so fucking true. And we make fun of them. Like, a lot of YouTubers make fun of them. A lot of people on social media, just regular people, make fun of those things, but they're so true. They're so fucking true. It goes back to this. That's why I drew it. It's all about your identity, your beliefs. If you have the belief of being arrogant, you're probably going to fulfill that belief. If you have the belief that, you know what, I have the mindset to be a millionaire, one of two things are going to happen to you, and both of them are probably going to lead to you actually becoming a millionaire. Or the third option, which is like you just end up giving up, which is like the worst fucking thing you can do. The first is that you believe you're a millionaire. That keeps you on track. That keeps your impulse control on, and you go and achieve that. You become a millionaire. Second thing that happens is that you kind of some kind of horrible event in your life makes you realize that holy shit, I have nothing like what it takes to be a millionaire. Maybe you enter the right room and you start talking to the right people and you're like, holy shit, these people are so much smarter than me. But you know what that does? That forces you, that makes you want to work harder. The third thing that could happen is that you kind of give up on your goal, and at that point you just kind of got what you deserved. It's fine, it's a part of life. As long as you admit it, people will be ready to forgive you, you know, as long as they're the right people, obviously. Lastly, an 8-step procedure that takes everything into account is just not necessary. You have to be far more clinical in your approach to making a change. If you constantly evaluate your thoughts, emotions, then plan, you'll never make it past stage 4. I agree with this, but not for the right reasons. I just think this is a self-criticism of this whole step-by-step process, which is just fundamentally flawed because of what he said right here. If you constantly evaluate your thoughts, emotions, and plan, I have a rule for myself, and it's to always lead with action. Just everything you do, there has to be action associated with it. Sitting and thinking about thoughts, emotions, and making plans. It's about James Clear talks about this in Atomic Habits: action versus preparation. That's just preparation. But a lot of times I feel like in the self-improvement space we mistake preparation to be a bad thing. It's like you need a balance of both. You can't just be going and taking action. You have to have thoughtful, intentioned, well-intentioned, intelligent actions. When you take those actions, you get feedback, and you use that feedback to create intentions, right? It's just I have a drawing on my whiteboard here. I'm not sure if it'll be very visible. It's these rungs, right? So you have, so blue is action, red is feedback, action, feedback, and planning, and then over here you have, I forgot what this was, but hopefully I'll remember later on. I'll be able to write a comment or something. But yeah, it's action and feedback. You just have to keep doing those two things, and I feel like that's what really gets you to your goals, and that's what really ends up changing your beliefs about yourself. Argument 2, the actions. Self-destruction to me is the ideal way of truly realizing yourself. The act of identifying your weaknesses and eliminating the parasitical bad habits formed around them, then building yourself back up, is what really makes a long-term change. What self-improvement does is build new habits, but fails to mitigate the root causes in the first place. Self-improvement would ask you to start working out because you were lazy. So you did. But the problem isn't that you weren't working out, it was that you are lazy. Now your laziness could stem from being depressed, overweight, overburdened. So you need to change that. It's the little things. Yeah. I feel like I do agree to some extent. I feel like there's a lot more nuance than one approach being better than the other, like I discussed. Self-improvement is for certain people. The way it's been described in this, I feel like self-improvement is the way for a lot of people. A lot of people who just aren't willing to take those really drastic steps to pour that acid on top of your hand. People aren't willing to go through that pain, and that's perfectly fine. If you're cool with being average, stay average. Like, there's nothing, like, honestly, there isn't anything wrong with being average. Just don't tell other people to stay average. That's what I believe. And I feel like this is very true. I have a specific friend. I hope he's watching, because I think he'll know who he is. Maybe he won't. Maybe he's just too arrogant. In this case, arrogance can be a bad thing, but you know what? Because of that arrogance, maybe one day his perception of reality will come falling down, and he'll actually be motivated to actually do the right things. But anyway, I'm getting off track. So this guy, he's kind of obsessed with video games. He spends a lot of time playing video games. Like his whole life is geared around it. In terms of self-improvement, he's started to go and play a sport. He plays tennis, I think. This is a good friend of mine. I love him. Like, he's an incredible guy. But like, a lot of things that I see in him that like just aren't aspirational to me. Some things that I just don't look up to. It's like you're still playing video games, but you don't stop. Your sleep schedule is still pretty shit. You stay up to like 4 5 a.m. making the excuse that, oh, I'm just a night owl. I have a lot of assignments, man. And you go and play tennis, and that's sufficient for you. I mean, I don't know how he plays tennis. Maybe he might be like a fucking god at it. He might be absolutely dog shit at it. Doesn't matter, because he's not really assessing the fundamental issues, which is the horrible sleep schedule. That shit will literally make you lose years of your life. He doesn't address the video games. That shit will ruin your dopaminergic system or whatever it is. And to him, that amount of self-improvement, going and playing tennis, is sufficient. To me, someone who has a lot higher standards than that, that's not enough. You have to self-destruct yourself. You have to self-destruct your aims in life. You have to completely stop playing video games. You have to delete Steam. You have to delete all the different fucking programs you have that promote this. You have to start picking up really good habits. Things like, if you like tennis, then lean into it. Start thinking about how you can completely optimize getting good at tennis. And this is why a lot of people stay average at sports. It's because they don't really fully lean into it. This happened with me. I used to be fucking horrible at sports. Like, I was a skinny fat kid. I'd never played any sports because I just hated the pain of playing. Right? I tried getting into cricket. I went for one class and I started to cry because the ball hit my shin or something. If you don't know, cricket balls are really fucking hard. But that happens to every kid and they deal with it. For me, it hit my shin and I started crying and I couldn't stop crying, and I had to call my dad to pick me up. It was really embarrassing. Everyone was like kind of looking at me weird. And I said, oh, I'm never going back there. When I started playing football, I was so terrified of the fucking football, and like what they tell me to do, what the other kids would tell me to do, was just stand between the ball and the player. That's all they told me to do. And they told me to do that with one specific player, the best player on the other team, just swamp him. That's what they do in professional football. When you have a team like fucking Reading playing Man United, they'll all swamp Marcus Rashford, right? That's what they tell me to do. And that's how it was up until the 8th grade, where like your whole value in that school was how good you were at sports. Like, no one gave a shit about like your character or whatever it was. In that school, you had to like work your ass off to get good at sports, and then you would get some actual respect. I didn't get good in that year, but that was kind of the start of me actually gaining respect, because when I moved schools back to the school that I was before 8th grade, I was just so much better at football. Like, I could actually consider myself like be able to play with these other guys, because before, like, I could not play at all. I was terrified of it. I forced myself during the 8th grade to like actually try and get better. The 9th and 10th grade, I got like average at it. Before I was horrible, then I got average. And then COVID and everything happened, and then recently, around a year ago, I started playing again. And I was still kind of average, but like, because we played with a bunch of kids, I got slightly better than average, but I wasn't the best by any means. I was probably like 5th or 6th in the ranking. I'm still not the best right now, but I've gotten so much fucking better, because just for like a solid month or two, everything I focused on was just football. Every single day I'd just go and practice football on my own. I'd look up the best training drills to do just on my own. It took complete self-destruction of my identity, and I had to think like an athlete, like someone who trains every single day to get better at all my weaknesses. My weak foot is so much better now. I'm so much better physically. I started going to the gym. I started deadlifting. Now the situation is pretty much that nobody wants to like 50-50 or duel with me, because like they'll get fucking bodied. Like, that's just how it is. Like, I'm I have like a decent physique now. I'm like decently strong. People don't wanna brawl for the ball with me. Like that's how I got this fucking injury. I mean, right now I have a sleeve around it, but earlier on, like just a few hours ago, it was in a cast. The cast is back there, the plaster. My point is that yeah, so most people just end up being average at the sport because they aren't fully focused on it. And they're just average. They just play it for fun. But for me, I had the real drive to get better at it, to become one of the better players, one of the best players in my like small group of friends that we do play. And I think I managed to do that. I think so. If not, then my arrogance will bite my ass, and I'll focus on getting better because you can just get better at whatever you try, really. Unless you're competing on a international level where genetics actually come into play, up until that point, you can just keep getting better, and nothing's gonna stop you. Right. Let's move on. So in the last paragraph, I don't want to. The author asked me not to talk about it, which is cool. I'm just gonna basically give my take on that whole thing. I think a lot of people who are really depressed and they listen and they really like to wallow in their depression, I feel like that's needed. It's needed for a lot of people. It's what I needed. That's what was therapy for me, right? You don't have someone who's gone through deep trauma, someone who's in a horrible situation in life. You can't just tell them to get up, clean your room, whatever. A lot of people really need therapy. A lot of people really need to wallow in their own depression. That's what I need at a certain point. When I was 13, 14, 15 years of age, I needed that. Recently, I've stopped becoming that person because I kind of got to that baseline where it's only up from there. It's like, I was in a hole. I climbed out of that hole, and then I didn't need to wallow in my own depression anymore. I didn't need therapy. What I needed was self-improvement, was this, not in the context of this, but like just working on myself and making real life progress rather than something like therapy and talking about my problems. You see, in different people's different people have different lives and different situations, and people need different things at different times. Sorry if that was too fast. Once you are out of that hole, you don't even want to wallow in your depression anymore, because it feels like, man, that was so shit. I don't want to go back into that hole. I want to climb up the fucking mountain, right? That's what's going to give me fulfillment. That's what's going to make me feel better, right? Rather than staying at the base of it where everyone's like with their cameras taking photos of the mountain. I want to go and fucking climb it, right? If you're in that situation, you really need to do things that induce like really positive mentalities, things that really, you just have to like build discipline from that point on. Discipline is what will make you feel fulfilled. And moving on, a personal anecdote. I couldn't wake up in the morning at 6:30 to save my life. Even if I was sleeping at 11 p.m., I was frustrated with myself. First, I tried to set alarms in gradual intervals like 7:15, 7, 6:50, 6:45, 6:30, etc. so I could get up at 6:45. Didn't work. Instead, the new strategy was to wake myself up with force. I asked a friend who wakes up early to call me at 6:30 in the morning. Then I would rush to the bathroom and splash water on my face. Worked fine in the first week. The next week, I asked him not to call me. Guess what? Woke up at 6:30 just fine. And this is something that I want to talk about for a bit, not because it's completely relevant to this, but one of this is something that everyone's done at some point in their life, especially if you're Gen Z, teenager, whatever you are. The waking up at like, if you want to wake up at a certain time, you set like 15-minute alarms, alarms in 15-minute increments. Yeah, that doesn't work because your mentality is like, oh, you know what, I'll wake up on the next one. and you snooze it, and you wake up on the next one, you snooze it again. Just keep doing it. That doesn't work, because all you're doing is lying to yourself. And the worst part is that you know you're lying. You know that you'll hit the snooze button. You know that if there is one moment to get up and get shit done, you'll go and do it. Maybe this isn't as straightforward as just setting one alarm and expecting that to work, because for a lot of people that doesn't work. What you have to do is what the author did here, is to wake himself up with force. Set the systems in place, set the real commitment in place to go and do that thing. Just acting to set that system on its own says a lot, right? A lot of people don't take this into account. Just simply setting up the system is action on its own, right? As opposed to just people think that okay, the day I start waking up at 6:30, that's going to be progress. No, it's going to be progress when you set up the systems to wake up at 6:30, when you make that commitment, regardless of what it is. That it's something that I just heard about in a podcast somewhere, where companies that will pay for their employees to learn a skill have a far less success rate in terms of the employee actually being productive with that skill, as opposed to if the employee paid for it themselves. Because if the employee actually sets the commitment in place, the money commitment, the financial commitment, they're way more likely to value that thing. If you set the commitment up to tell a friend that to call you in the morning and wake you up, that's going to be so much more valuable to you than just lying to yourself, because you don't value your own words, and you know that. It's something that even I struggle with to this day. Getting up on time, it's something I struggle with today, right? Anyway, argument 3, consumerist. Now, this is a specific argument, but the newest tradition of self-improvement is inherently capitalist and pushing consumerism. It's important to remember that to change yourself for the better, you need absolutely nothing. This is a battle between your mind, your body, and your desires. It is deeply human. Example, you and your friends spend too much time on Instagram. You all edit your photos and portray a version of yourself that doesn't exist. This induces depression, anxiety, FOMO, body dysmorphia. Solution: be real. Take photos of yourself in a limited time without a filter. Be real. What? You need an app to be real? No. Your raw form is one without any such platforms. In your hopes of exiting Instagram, you shift to be real. Self-improvement can't be transferring your unhealthy obsession with social media from one platform to another. If you are truly suffering, delete your online presence today. Be real is just another mechanism keeping you on social media. Be real is worth 600 million US dollars. This is all just a cycle of capitalism pushing consumerism on you. Well, this is an interesting topic. I feel like this is so much more nuanced. There is obviously an element of truth to this, and I do agree with it to a certain extent, but as all things, there's so much more nuance. Like I mentioned towards the beginning, in order to really change your identity, to change your who, you can't just delete social media. You can't just write on a piece of paper, I am an athlete. You can't just become disciplined, right? You can't just stop jerking off. Over time, you have to make those small incremental changes that change the way your brain is wired, right? Instead of having one really difficult, one really steep mountain to climb, you could have small steps, right? You take a step, you evaluate it, you're like, holy shit, I just got one step higher. I could probably do the next one. And you do the next one, and you keep going, right? Obviously, it might get a bit harder towards the top, but it's way better than trying to climb a whole steep slope, one consistent steep slope. It's far easier to slip on that slope and fall down, right? So I feel like it's very necessary, if you want to change your identity, if you want to change your identity from being someone who is obsessed with social media to being someone who's just not on it, you can't just delete it. I mean, you can, and like if you want to, then go ahead. By all means, go ahead, because from that experience alone, you learn so much about yourself. You learn so much about the situation you're in. I'm not saying you don't do it just because you can't do something. Just because doing something won't give you the result you want, doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. You probably should. You probably should delete social media. But going from Instagram to something like BeReal, obviously BeReal on its own, this is actually like a very similar to what happened with me. BeReal on its own, like, it's not great. BeReal in a vacuum isn't great, but compared to Instagram, it's way better. For me, I did the exact same thing. Like, I deleted Instagram, and I needed something to satisfy that itch in my brain, because I hadn't fully rewired my brain into just being off social media. And obviously there was some element of pain that I needed to go through from going from Instagram to BeReal. And when I did, it was so much better. It was self-improvement. And then I went from BeReal to nothing for like a decent amount of time. I was just not checking social media. I didn't check social media for like 2 months. It felt fucking incredible. But I don't think I would have been able to do that in a sustainable fashion if I just went off Instagram entirely, because I would have gone back in a week. So yeah, I got distracted. There were kids yelling outside the fucking window. Anyway, I think pushing the narrative that it's just a cycle of capitalism is it's a bit of a stretch. I do think that the self-improvement industry is obsessed with capitalism, but in a completely different way. I think the promotion of the idea of like getting a bunch of girls living in hedonism, going out and partying in really expensive places, buying really expensive cars, just consumerism in that form, I think that's the real evil of the whole self-improvement industry. And I feel like there's people who are promoting a really negative message in terms of that. Someone like Hamza, someone like First Man is a lot more controversial because he says a lot of controversial shit, but like he really preaches this idea of like, if you can't just stay rich, act broke, right? There's no reason for you to fall into consumerism. Like, there's enough empirical evidence to suggest that materialism doesn't really make you happy, and it doesn't. But it's a completely different topic. And I feel like despite having a lot of nice things in my life, like really nice things thanks to my family, I don't feel like I'm ready to talk about this in enough detail yet. I feel like once I'm confident to really talk about consumerism, my true perspective on it, I have an idea of what I'm supposed to do right now about it for the next like 5-10 years. But I'm just, that belief of mine is kind of slightly loosely held, right? It's something that I'm going to follow through on, but I'm open to changing my mind on it, right? But right now, yeah, I do agree that the whole self-improvement industry, especially like a lot of guys who look up to like Andrew Tate, fucking these rappers that promote like a horrible lifestyle, horrible hedonistic lifestyle, like doing shit ton of drugs, buying cars, having like brand logos like on your fucking chest. That shit is gross. It's disgusting. I don't want that shit, right? I feel that's just a form of consumerism. It's a form of hedonism. It's horrible. I don't want it. It's something that Hamza talks about a lot. It's like, if you want to be happy, you don't look to material things. You look inside of yourself. You look at yourself and you ask yourself, why am I unhappy, right? And this is something that I really love about Buddhist mentalities. It's the Buddhist ideology, and I sometimes I've even said that, like, don't be surprised if I convert to Buddhism and I like permanently move to the mountains after like I turn 40 or 50 or something. Anyway, Here's a diagram I would like to share with you. This is in place of the diagram previously shown in the article. Desire, self-destruction, rebuild. And I do feel like I agree with this a lot more. This resonates with me a lot more than the first one. I still really resonate with this process way more. The who, how, and what, but they're not really on the same level. I feel like they're discussing different things. I feel like this is more of a. Both of them talk about self-improvement. It does to some extent, right? Desire, self-destruction, and rebuild. Now, a lot of people have, again, a lot of people believe that you just. So there's two polar opposites, right? One is that you can't be depressed, just don't be depressed. Just like start working out, start reading, start delaying gratification, and you'll get better. And there's another group of people who believe that it's just best to wallow in your misery, right? That you can't do anything about it. That if you're diagnosed with clinical depression, you're fucked for life. That's not true either. The truth lies somewhere in between. Not even in between. I think both of them are true to some extent, but they're true on different layers, on different levels in life. They're true for different people. Like I mentioned, if you're in that hole, you need things like therapy. You need things like really bawling your eyes out on certain nights. You really need coping mechanisms, right? And those coping mechanisms aren't sustainable. It's not something that you can do for the rest of your life. But if those coping mechanisms get you out of that hole, that's when you need to work on like doing positive things, delaying gratification, reading, working out, right? And then that's how you get to the top. And I think that whole process is something that I think the author might agree with me that like that whole process of when you're in the shitter, maybe allowing yourself to go a little bit further below and then going back up. I feel like that's what true self-destruction is. I feel like that's a way more realistic way of doing things, because if you don't fix your mental health, you can't improve, you can't get better. You should try, but you probably won't succeed. You won't probably reach the goal. You'll be better than before, you'll learn a lot more, but you probably won't succeed. Right? So I feel like within this, I feel like what I would do is that I would turn this into a flow chart, and I would probably split the second phase of the self-destruction phase into 3 parts. One is going further down if you need that. If you're at rock bottom, then you do the next step, which is getting out of the hole, which is one process that requires certain habits, certain things, certain resources. The second process requires a completely different set of habits, resources, because everyone like goes through different phases in life, and we can't just clump every individual into one thing. But I do feel like is that a lot of people aim to clump this group of younger men together. It's like even within that group you have a lot of nuance, you have a lot of different people, different experiences. Maybe try this out. Not only is this easier, but to me more impactful in sparking a change in your life. I would like to start a discussion with this article, because even I am not fully convinced with either side of the argument. Reach out to me. So yeah, that's about it. I hope I did well in understanding Chalk's approach to this, his ideas, and I hope you, the viewer, got some value out of this as well. I hope this wasn't too long, but if it was, then I'm glad you stuck around till the end. Let me know if you did, because like there were a couple of people who stuck around till the end of the last one. Like I really like that. That was really wholesome. I loved seeing that. But yeah, that's about it. I don't have much to say. Thank you for watching. I love you all. Goodbye.